Hello, my name is Jonathan Campbell. I'm a quadriplegic. I was injured in a bicycle accident 10 years ago. I raced BMX and had been doing it for about 20 years and wasn't doing anything crazy. I just lost control on my hometown track on a section of the track I knew really well. And the accident itself wasn't that bad, but the result was I damaged my spinal cord at C5 and C6. That day, immediately after my accident, I was medevaced to Chapel Hill Medical Center, and when I was loaded onto the helicopter, as soon as I crashed, I was still conscious and I couldn't move or feel anything, and I could only move my left arm a little bit. And I couldn't move my right arm at all, and immediately I knew what I had done, and I remember being loaded onto the medevac, thinking to myself, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, please God, just please strike down this helicopter, because there's no way I want to live like that. And I remember being on the medevac and struggling to breathe and being really scared, and the paramedic there, he put his hand on my shoulder because I think he knew I couldn't feel below my chest, and he said, just try to breathe, and he told me it was going to be okay. And about 20 minutes later, we landed in Chapel Hill, and I thought to myself, oh, we landed. I was quickly sedated shortly after that, and I ended up getting pneumonia, and I needed routine coughings and drainings, and they decided to kind of put me under sedation for a couple weeks while I dealt with that. And I woke up and I was in Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and which is a specialized TBI and spinal cord center. And I was confused and scared and still struggling to breathe. I felt like I was suffocating at night and still needed regular coughings, assisted coughing from the nurses. And one of the things, I had never spent a day in a hospital before, so I didn't really even understand how hospitals worked. And what I found was that oftentimes I was hitting the call bell a lot, and I became such a nuisance to my roommate at the time that they did what they did with a lot of patients, was they brought them out into the hallway near the nurse's station. I remember thinking at the time, oh, well, good, I'll at least be able to summon a nurse when I need one. Well, I didn't have a call button out there, for starters. But then second, I didn't realize that, the way hospitals work is that every nurse has their own patients, and that you can't just grab any nurse that's walking by and go, hey, I need help. So, I was burning up at one point in the hallway, and I remember just trying to get my nurse or my CNA at the time just to give me some water. And oftentimes I was ignored by every nurse that would walk by, even if all I needed was a sip of water. And I remember just not even understanding why that was. In fact, at one point, one CNA was actually mocking my cries. By the time my nurse finally did come to me, they discovered that my temperature was 102, and at that point they started packing like ice under my armpits and trying to cool me down. So I had a really hard time getting through the night, every night. One night, a new nurse that I hadn't had before comes in, and his name was Marcus. Then he looks at my notes, and he goes, it looks like you've been having trouble sleeping lately. And I laughed and was like, you don't even know what you're in for, because I'm gonna keep you busy tonight. And he did something that none of the other nurses or CNAs had bothered to do. Is he asked me why. What is it that's keeping me up at night? And I told him that I felt like I couldn't breathe, and that I was lonely, and that I needed help turning, changing position. I'd get uncomfortable in one position, and they'd move me to another, and something would be wrong, and I'd be uncomfortable in that position. And so I was also on fluid restriction at the time, and I didn't know why I was on fluid restriction. And I later learned it was because they try to, with paras and quads, the goal is to get you off the Foley bag and get you into doing intermittent catheterization. And so you have to watch your fluid intake when that happens. But nobody had explained that to me at the time. They said, you're on fluid restriction. You can only have a pitcher of water to get you through the night. And I was going through that water in like a couple hours. And I had no concept of how much, because I wasn't lifting it up myself. I couldn't use my arms at the time. And so I had no idea how much water was left until it was gone. And so Marcus asked me, he said, okay, we're going to take care of you tonight. We're going to cough you really good and get some of that phlegm up right before you go to bed. And then as far as the water goes, what we'll do is, there's like 4 or 5 cups in a pitcher. So I'll just put out 5 cups, empty cups, and when you come in and want some water, I'll fill one up with water and you can drink it, and then you know how many cups you have left. It's like, oh my God, this guy's brilliant. And he also suggested having somebody bring in some like sugar-free lifesavers, because he said that'll keep your mouth wet, but it won't dry you out like sugar candy will. So the next day my mom brought some in, and that helped a lot. But what mattered the most was he was being proactive. He was really trying to get to the cause, not treat things as they came up. And that meant a lot to me. And it was funny because he would routinely, when I get a lifesaver, he took his cut. So he'd always take one as well. But it was worth it. That was a small price to pay. And then there was another nurse, Connie, who reminded me of one of my boss's wife, and she was the sweetest lady. She knew I was having trouble sleeping, and she would make chamomile tea every night and bring that in to help me get to sleep. So what's interesting is I don't really remember the names of the nurses that were that neglected me or I felt weren't compassionate. But I'll always remember Marcus, and I remember that he had two young boys at the time, and I think today they're probably teenagers. And I'll always remember Connie. And there was that paramedic, and I remember him just saying that I was going to be okay. And I look back on the past 10 years of my life and how it's been a struggle, but that paramedic was right. I would be okay. The one last thing that kind of fits in with this, months later, I was in therapy with a occupational therapist, and she was trying to help teach me how to transfer into a driver's seat of a car. And I was really, really struggling at it, and I kind of broke down in tears because kind of the thoughts of how easy it used to be to, get into a car, get out of a car. I just had taken it for granted, and it just upset me at the time how hard it was to try and get my legs into the car. And I broke down crying. As I explained that to her, I looked up and saw that she was crying also. And it was like after that, it really showed me that she really cared. It wasn't just a paycheck. It was that she really, really cared. And my 10-year injury anniversary was a couple months ago, and I got back in touch with her, and I asked her if she remembered that day, if she remembered that one day, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'll never forget it." She said that changed my life, and I never would have thought that. I think that sometimes you don't realize the impact that you have on someone else's life, and until they tell you that. And I think that with the medical profession, patients, we don't expect nurses and doctors to be like Florence Nightingale, but we don't want you to be like Nurse Ratched either, and I think that the one thing, you all in the profession you're going into are in a position where the little things that you do for a patient can leave an impression on them for the rest of their life, because what you're doing is you're kind of helping them get their life back. And for me, it's a privilege to be here, just to be able to thank you all for what the field you're going into and what you're choosing to do. And I think that the best thing you can do is just go about your job and think, what small little things can I do that are going to stay with this patient for the rest of his or her life. And I think if you approach your job that way, you can't go wrong. So, I think, do I have a picture? Yeah, so anyway, the past 10 years have been quite the adventure for me, but I've managed to kind of put a life back together, something when I was on that medevac, something I never thought I'd be able to do again. I didn't think anybody could live a life in a wheelchair, but I've kind of found out that I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong. So up on the top left there, that's actually the last photo I have of myself standing. I'm standing next to my ex-girlfriend there. That's why she's cropped out. But the last photo I have is of me at the Franklin Roosevelt Memorial. So it's kind of ironic that the last photo I have of myself standing is actually next to a statue of a guy who spent his adult life in a wheelchair. And then that's me racing BMX. And then I got into playing wheelchair rugby for a little while. And then up there, I went back to Marymount College, which is where I went to school in North Carolina. And then that's my amazing girlfriend, Lori. She and I have been dating for about 5 years now. This is a party over the summer with me and some of my friends and our children, our little dogs. And that's my baby, Sadie, over there. So I have all these amazing things in my life, and I'm grateful. And I'm grateful for the people I've met over the years, and many of those people that I've met have been in your profession. And I'm grateful. So thank you all.
Thank you.